All right, let's get our attention up front. Eyes up here, please. All right, let's go ahead and get started going through our notes. So on Friday, just as a reminder, we spent the time going through class and we looked at our spectral lines, right? We had these tubes on and we looked at them through a spectroscope and you're able to see like what colors of light each one of these emitted, right? Right now, if I just look at this, it looks blue, but if you look at this through a spectroscope, maybe you see some other colors too, all right? Now, today we're going to be learning how those form and what happens in those. So starting off, we can see an example of what y'all actually did, right? You have your emission tube. You then have something to separate it out into different colors. Now, we use these spectroscopes, right? There's different ways to do it. This is just one way. And then what we saw is we then saw different colors of light separated out, right? This purple light turns into a red light, a green light, a blue light, and a purple light. All right? Questions so far? All right. Now, that thing that we saw in the spectroscope is called an atomic emission spectrum. So an atomic emission spectra is just the pattern formed when light emitted by an element is separated into different wavelengths that it contains. Questions so far? All good? All right. So we also saw that there's different types of spectra. When we took our spectroscope and pointed it at these ceiling lights here, we just saw a continuous spectra, right? We saw the entire rainbow. But when we looked at these different lamps that just have a single element in them, we only got the specific lines of our atomic emission spectrum, right? So each one of these things are called spectral lines. So an atomic emission spectra is made up of spectral lines. Now a spectral line is just the element's specific colors of light that correspond to different wavelengths. So hydrogens, like we said before, hydrogens looks like this. It's got a red line, a green line, a blue line, and a purple line. If we look at helium, it's a little bit more complex, right? There's 2 purple lines, 4 blue lines, 3 green lines, a yellow, and a red. Now, the thing to notice, though, is that each one is unique, right? Hydrogen is different than helium, and helium is different from sodium, and sodium is different from copper. No matter what element you're looking at, it's going to have an individual and unique spectral lines. Now, because of that, spectral lines are often called elemental fingerprints. Now, on people, your fingerprints are all unique. Even if you have an identical twin, your fingerprint is still different than your twins, okay? So in the same way, we say that elements have fingerprints because their spectral lines are all unique and different. Yeah. All right, questions so far? All right, so now I just want you to summarize. Go ahead, try and explain. Why are spectral lines like fingerprints? Go ahead, try and explain. Why are spectral lines like fingerprints? Go ahead, try and explain, please. Okay. Yeah, cool. Nice.
What do you guys think?
Because they all have their own different patterns.
Yeah, nice. I like that. It's a great, it's a great explanation. They all have their own different pattern. Pretty exciting. And why? Why do they?
Like this,
All right, so any thoughts? Why do y'all think that these are like fingerprints?
They each have their own unique spectral lines. Like they're like the same, but they're different. Lines.
Same different. All right, awesome, thanks. All right, let's get our attention up front. Eyes up here, please. All right, so let's go ahead and go through this. So all of you probably have something slightly different written, right? But the key thing that you want to recognize here is that spectral lines are unique. That's not how you spell unique. Okay? So if you're looking at hydrogen, it will be unique compared to helium, right? Every single one has a separate and distinct line that it has. All right. Questions so far? All right. So now let's go ahead and look at why this happens. We're going to skip down a little bit here and first go look at hydrogen and mercury. So what we're looking at right now are the energy levels of hydrogen and mercury. Okay? Now, when we look at these, this is just a simplified version of a Bohr model. So for hydrogen, it has that first energy level, and the second one's pretty far away, and then the third is pretty close to that, and then the fourth is even closer there, and then the fifth is like right outside that one. Right? So we have this energy level diagram for hydrogen. Now, for this, drawing this out is kind of annoying every time, right? And so instead, we just focus on like one narrow band of this, right? And if we just look at one section here, we have the first energy level that we call n equals 1. And then we have the second energy level that you call n equals 2. And the third, n equals 3, and so on and so forth, okay? So if you take this little like snapshot of a full Bohr diagram, you just get this, right? You just have the first energy level, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and so on. Does this make sense so far? Okay. Now, our largest gap is between the second energy level and the first energy level. And then we have a slightly smaller gap between the third and the second, and a slightly smaller gap between the third and the fourth, and so on all the way up. Okay. Now, what we saw during the flame test lab was that every time electrons move from one energy level to another, energy either gets absorbed or released. And we saw that when electrons move down in energy levels, they release energy. So what I could draw here is I could show that electrons, if they move from the second energy level down to the first, this is going to release some amount of energy. Okay. Now, because the gap here is really large, we're going to release a lot of energy. Okay. So you don't need to know how to predict how much energy is going to get released just by looking at this. But this one, I already know, this is going to release UV light because it's a really large transition. It's pretty high in energy. Okay. If we instead look at the transition from the third to the second, this gap is pretty small. Right? If you look from the third energy level down to the second energy level, I changed my color to red there because this releases enough energy to create red light. All right. Now, if I draw another transition, if we go from the fourth energy level down to the second energy level, this would be enough energy to make green. If you go from the fifth all the way down to the second, that would be enough energy to make blue. And if you go all the way from the sixth down to the second, that's enough energy to make purple. Right? As you increase the size of the transition, you get higher energy light. Now, eventually, you get to the point where it's ultraviolet and you can't see it. So when you actually did your spectral lines lab, there were a bunch of lines that were coming through your spectroscope that you couldn't actually see, right? There were some that were too high energy, that were ultraviolet, that your eyes just can't detect. There were others that were too low energy, so those would be in the infrared range that your eyes also couldn't detect. But the ones that you could see were the purple, blue, green, and red, right? Now, we could do the same thing for mercury. Now, if we look on mercury, are mercury's energy levels the same distance apart as hydrogen's? Thank you. Awesome. Thanks. All right. No, right? The distances are slightly different. And so if we were to look at mercury's transitions, we would get different colors of light. So because the spacing of energy levels is different, that means we're going to get different colors of light. Questions so far? All right. So the next slide here is just review. Okay? Remember when we first learned about light? We learned that purple is the highest energy light because it has the shortest wavelength. And red is the highest energy light, highest wavelength light, so it has the lowest energy. okay? So looking here is just a reminder, right? If we have a higher energy transition, if it's really far, we're looking at something that is maybe purple. If we're looking at a smaller energy transition, that's more likely to be red. Does this make sense so far? All right, questions? All right, so this is just a summary of what we went over with flame test, right? When electrons absorb energy, they move away from the nucleus to a higher energy level. And then they can be in this state here where they're in a high energy level. They can then release energy and then go back down, all right? So when you are seeing an element emit light, what you're seeing is the electrons move from high energy levels to lower energy levels, all right? Questions so far? All right. So now I want you to try and match the color of light to a transition. So on here, when I say n equals 6 to n equals 2, that means we're going from the 6th energy level down to the 2nd. If it says n equals 5 to n equals 2, then you're going from the 5th down to the 2nd. 4 to 2 is 4th to 2nd, and 3 to 2 is 3rd to 2nd. All right? So I want you to try and match these colors of light that are in hydrogen spectrum with these ones here. All right? Go ahead and try this out. See if you can do it. So imagine you're all the waves are really close together. It's a short wave. If your boat comes down a lot, what if the waves are really far? Is your boat moving down a lot? Right? You can move up and down as you wait. You move up and down. If it was a short wave, boats moving up. Yes, they choose very much. And so if you have a shorter wave, exactly close together, and so then the gap is just feet.
Because if I look
That's
at
just
from 6 to 2, that's a really big drop.
Given this diagram says
It's a big drop. That means it's releasing a lot of energy on our spectrum, which has the
so
most
that
energy.
one electron did go from the 6
We can do
or
polar ultraviolet, so there's possible. Oh, that's okay. So what do I do?
That's in the low.
Here's well, that's not as big as my frequency or my light energy. Because we always go, depends on how large the drop is. Because this is a smaller drop, what color should it be? Approximately. Be red.
We're going to go to the bar. Okay?
This
All right, let's get our attention up front. Eyes up here, please.
slightly larger.
All right. Let's go ahead and go over our next problem here. So, on the paper notes, some of these are already defined. They're already labeled for you which one is which, and you're just trying to explain, okay? That's fine. Now, it works either way, right? Now, if we look here, if we look at my spectral lines, I have 4 lines, right? A purple, a blue, a green, and a red. Now, purple is my highest energy because it has the shortest wavelength. And red has my lowest energy because it has the longest wavelength. All right? So, because of this, I can now assign them, right? So if purple is the highest energy, that means that it's going to go the farthest distance. So that's going to go all the way from 6 down to 2. Right? The higher energy, the further it goes. So this 6 to 2 is purple. If we keep going from 5 to 2, that's going to be our next highest energy. So that one would be blue. 4 to 2, that's the next highest energy, so almost our second smallest. That would be green. And lastly, the smallest energy change is our smallest energy light on our spectrum. So this one would be red. All right? So now that we've gone over how to actually assign each color to a transition, like yours already had, now what I want you all to do is try and finish those sentences that are on your paper notes. Try and explain. Why is the 6 to 2 purple? Why is the 3 to 2 red? Go ahead, try and explain. Try that out. See if you can do it. Got any questions, things you want to review? So right now you're just trying to explain the thing that I just went over. It's like, why is 6 to 2 purple? Why is like 3 to 2 red? Like why do each of these get so Yep, you're just gonna try to do that. All right, let's get our attention up front. Eyes up here, please. Let's get our attention up front. Eyes up here. All right. Let's go ahead and review, right? We assigned the purple to the 6 to 2 transition because that's the biggest transition. It gets the highest energy light. We assigned the 3 to 2 to red because that's the smallest transition. It gets the lowest energy light. All right, question so far? All right. So now let's look at something else that we can do with an elemental fingerprint. So here, you're looking at 7 different elemental fingerprints. I think 6. I was close. All right. So one of them, we don't know what element it is. The other 5, we do. I want you all to try and use this to match what's the unknown to one of the known elements. So tell me, is that unknown? Is it helium, oxygen, neon, argon, or xenon? Try and figure it out. Try and match your unknown to one of your knowns. See if you can do it. I don't even have colors. Yeah, so if I had like 2 unknown, I got which one. You know what to do. Yeah, so the fire is the electrons. You're just trying to. I'm just playing a match. Which one matches the end? That's the best one. Alright, let's get our attention up front. Eyes up here, please. All right. So on this one, to identify, if we are looking here, something that you can do is you can try and match lines. So for example, if I start with just these two green lines, I want to see any elements just that have these two green lines right here. So okay, helium does not have those. It looks like oxygen might have those. I'm not sure yet because there's two green right there. Neon definitely has them. Argon doesn't. And xenon does not. So now I'm just down to oxygen and neon. Now let's just pick another set of lines. Let's pick the blue lines here. So this blue line, there's one here in my unknown. If I check oxygen, it does not have that. But neon does. So if I keep checking everything the unknown has, neon also has. So because every elemental spectra is unique, if the unknown matches neon, then it must also be neon, okay? So our correct answer here is neon. All right, questions so far? All good? All right. So that's where we're going to stop in the notes for today. Next up, we're going to be looking at